Hey, it's Danny. Welcome to projectmanaverse.com. In this video, I'm going to give you 4 warning signs that your risks and issues management is poor. So let's jump straight in. First of all, what is risk and issues management? First of all, let's start with risks and issues. So a risk on your project is basically anything that could go wrong, that could have a negative impact on your chances of your project success. So things that could go wrong, that's basically what risks are. And if that risk actually happens and it materializes, then that risk becomes an issue. So risks and issues are a pain. They prevent us from getting the things done we're supposed to get done and achieving the outcomes that we want to achieve. And all the tasks that we need to get done and complete to make sure our project is delivered and is ultimately a success, risks and issues will threaten all those tasks and block those tasks in some cases. So that's what risks and issues are. Risks and issues management is basically keeping on top of the risks and issues. It's making sure they're anticipated, making sure they're documented, making sure they're socialized and talked about to the right stakeholders, making sure they're constantly checked to understand if the risk, the chance of it happening has increased or decreased, and it also includes the actual mitigation of those risks, trying to stop them from happening, and also thinking about if they do happen, what can we do to mitigate the impact and reduce the damage that those issues will cause ultimately. So that's enough about what risks and issues are. Let's now talk about why you should care about having good risk and issues management skills or as a project manager. Well, if you get this right and you learn how to do this well, it really does make a difference to your project. It will make the project go so much more smoothly. I've seen projects that are constantly firefighting and rushing around, and in comparison to my own projects, I just sometimes scratch my head and wonder what is going on? Why are they struggling so much in their projects? And a big part of that is down to the risks and issues management, predicting those risks up front and making sure you're doing everything you can to make sure those risks don't happen and they don't convert to issues and start causing you problems. It's a really important thing. So if you get it right, it will just make your project journey so much more smooth, and ultimately it will increase the chance of your project being a success. So that's why you should care about it. Now, this also ties into things like good planning, good stakeholder management. All these elements of project management, they all come together. They're all part of the big system. They all impact your chances of success. But risks and issues management is a big one of them. And if you can get it right, you will definitely have a smoother project journey. So let's now move on to the 4 warning signs that your risk and issues management is poor. So number 1 is that issues materialize when they first haven't been risks. So if you find this happening, issues are popping out of nowhere and you had no idea they're going to happen. That can happen sometimes, but usually you should have some idea that issue was going to happen. There should be a risk preceding the issue. That's why when we raise a risk, we track it, we try and stop it, but sometimes we can't do anything about it, and that risk will materialize and it becomes an issue. So usually there's a history, there's a bit of background before the issue materializes, and we have some idea of it's happening before it does. But if you just have issues that are popping up out of nowhere and there's been no record of a risk logged before it, that can be a sign that you haven't spent enough time thinking about the risks, you haven't talked about them enough with your team, you don't have enough experience as a project manager to anticipate them. The more new you are to project management, the more time you should spend doing a bit of workshopping around risks and issues, or at least spending some time during your weekly meeting group, your weekly project working group, thinking about with your team, right, what could go wrong in this project? Let's look at the plan and think about what are some key things that could stop this plan from being actualized and actually happening. So that's one sign. So if you have those issues popping up, it could mean that you haven't spent enough time thinking about the risks, and you might have overlooked that from happening. You haven't thought carefully enough about it. You haven't thought about all the things you're trying to achieve from different perspectives and different stakeholders' perspectives, bringing that experience to the whole melting pot of all those elements that you need to consider when you're planning and trying to get the project spot on in your project plan and thinking about all the risks in advance. So that's warning sign number 1. Issues are popping up that haven't first been risks. And just as a little side note, the PMO or project management office who kind of look after the documentation and a lot of the governance, they don't like it when issues appear without being a risk first of all. So just a warning sign, you'll probably have people on your back about it if you start raising too many issues that first haven't been risk. So that's warning sign number one. Warning sign number two is you're being chased a lot to update your risks and issues log. So you should have a risks and issues log. You can either have your own log, but you might also have a central log somewhere where you have to log them in the shared software or some kind of system where all project managers and all projects ultimately feed into. So either way, you need to make sure that you're updating your risks and issues log regularly. Now, if you find you're being constantly chased to update it, usually you have to leave some kind of commentary every week or every 2 weeks to say how the risk is progressing, what are the chances of it happening, has a risk score changed at all, has it become an issue, all that kind of good stuff. Have you mitigated it, or if it's an issue, what have we done to close it down? You need to keep making sure you're updating the commentary so people know that you're proactively managing these risks and issues. If you're being chased to do that a lot of the time, that probably means you're not on top of your risk and issues management, because although it's a pain, when you really truly start to proactively manage your risks and issues, you will be doing that automatically. You'll be updating it, you'll be keeping a log of it, you'll be looking at what's the next step to close down this risk, why hasn't it happened. You'll be being proactive about that. You won't need someone to chase you about it. So that's a second very clear hallmark or warning sign that your risks and issues management may not be as good as it could be if you're constantly being chased for the updates on the risk log. Okay, the third warning sign that your risks and issues management is not so good is that you find yourself having lots of senior escalation meetings. Now, escalation meetings are basically when you're in a situation where you can't resolve the issue yourself or with your team at the current level of seniority within that working group, and you have to get some more senior heavy hitters involved to try and sort out the problem. And that's what we call escalation meetings. If you escalate an issue or escalate a problem, it goes up the chain of command. So someone with a bit more power and a bit more force behind their words can have a look at it and try and make things happen. If you find yourself constantly in those escalation meetings, that probably means your risk and issues management is not very good. It also probably means your planning is not very good. Again, it all comes back to that. There's multiple elements that feed into a good project, and risk and issues management is a big part of it. But definitely, this is one where if you are in those meetings quite a lot, it probably means you haven't managed your risks very well and you haven't tried to mitigate them enough, and you haven't anticipated issues or risks that convert later on to issues. And I see this a lot. I see other peers, project managers, they're always in these escalation meetings with the senior leaders, and I just wonder why. Well, can't you just deal with it yourselves? But I've come to learn that that's down to poor planning, poor risk and issues management. So if you're in those meetings all the time, your risk and issues management probably isn't very good and you need to improve it. Okay, the fourth warning sign is that you're constantly firefighting. On your project, firefighting often happens. You can't always avoid it, especially at the later phases when you're in the last throes of testing and you're trying to get everything done and ready before your final go live. That's kind of natural to be firefighting in those stages, especially when defects are popping up and all that kind of stuff. But throughout your project, you don't want to be firefighting too much, even in those testing phases. Again, if you've planned things well, you've got a good solid plan, all the stakeholders have been engaged, and your risk and issues management have been good, and you have anticipated all the things that could go wrong, either from brainstorming with your team or from previous experience as a project manager, probably ideally a bit both of those, you'll find that you right from the start of the project, you had a good sense of what the risk could be. You've mitigated them, you've stopped them from happening where possible. And if issues do come up and they materialize, you're ready for them. You've got a mitigation plan. So you're not rushing around thinking, oh my God, what do we do? And everyone's panicking and you're having these like diary buster meetings and all that stuff. If you're firefighting all the time and you're being distracted from delivering your main plan, that should be your main focus. You don't want too many distractions from your main plan and your 2-week look ahead. You should be executing that, and that's your main focus. If you're firefighting, it means you're being pulled away from doing the things that you have to do because you're trying to sort out issues that are popped up. An issue has popped up here, an issue has popped up here. It's very consuming on your time and your resource and your team resources. So you want to avoid that. And again, if you're firefighting a lot, usually down to bad risk and issues management and bad planning as well. Okay, that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more videos like this one, hit the subscribe button, daily videos. And until tomorrow, please take care.